The envelope hit the marble table before anyone said my name. Not a word, not a greeting, just the sound of expensive paper sliding across cold stone, stopping right in front of my untouched plate. I looked up. Margaret Carter didn't blink. She never did. "Sign it, Ava," she said. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Behind her, Lucas stood by the window, his back to me, his hands in his pockets, silent. And next to him, next to my husband, was Brielle Knox. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't ashamed. She was smiling. Let me back up, because this didn't start with divorce papers. It started 3 years earlier, when I believed love could survive anything, when I thought being good enough would be enough. I was wrong. I met Lucas Carter at a charity gala in Midtown. He was charming, confident, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone else look like extras in his movie. I was a project manager at a nonprofit. Smart, sure, but not wealthy, not from his world. And maybe that's what he liked about me at first. I wasn't trying to impress him. I didn't know who his family was. I didn't care about the Carter name or the real estate empire or the generational wealth that built half of Buckhead. I just liked him. We got married 6 months later. His mother didn't come to the wedding. Margaret Carter made it clear from day one I was not what she had planned for her son. But I tried. God, I tried. I learned how to dress for their events, how to smile at the right people, how to speak without saying too much. I worked behind the scenes on Lucas's biggest projects, researching zoning laws, managing contractor schedules, negotiating deals he'd later take credit for at board meetings. I didn't mind. I thought we were building something together. But Margaret saw it differently. To her, I was temporary, a phase, something Lucas would outgrow once he realized what he truly deserved. Brielle Knox was everything I wasn't. Old money, confident in a way that only comes from never being told no, beautiful in that effortless country club way. She and Lucas had known each other since boarding school, and when she came back to Atlanta after her divorce, Margaret made sure she was invited to everything, every gala, every dinner party, every Sunday brunch at the estate. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Lucas barely spoke to her. He came home to me. He kissed me goodnight. But then the late meetings started, the business trips that didn't quite add up, the way he'd check his phone at dinner and smile at something I'd never see. I knew. Deep down, I knew, but I didn't say anything, because saying it out loud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that. Then came the night of the anniversary gala. The Carter family hosted it every year at the Piedmont Driving Club. Black tie, 1,000 guests, speeches about legacy and tradition and the future of Atlanta. I wore a navy gown, simple, elegant. I thought I looked beautiful. Lucas barely glanced at me, but when Brielle walked in wearing emerald green, he couldn't take his eyes off her, and neither could anyone else. She moved through that room like she owned it, like she'd already won something I didn't know we were competing for. Margaret introduced her to the board members, to the investors, to everyone who mattered. She called her a dear family friend. She called her one of us. She didn't introduce me to anyone. I stood there, holding a glass of champagne I didn't drink, watching my husband laugh with another woman while his mother orchestrated my erasure in real time. That was the night I realized the truth. I wasn't losing Lucas. I'd never really had him. Not in the way that mattered. Not in the way his family would ever allow. 2 weeks later, I found the lease agreement. Brielle's name. A penthouse in Buckhead. Paid for by Carter Properties. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or cry or throw anything. I just stood in his office, holding the paper, waiting for him to lie. He didn't even try. "It's not what you think," he said, and that was it. No apology, no explanation, just a quiet dismissal, like I was a business problem he'd deal with later. I moved into the guest room that night. He didn't stop me. Margaret called the next morning, not to comfort me, not to apologize, to tell me how this was going to go. "You'll sign a non-disclosure agreement," she said. "You'll leave quietly. We'll provide a settlement. Generous considering the circumstances, but if you make this difficult, Ava, you'll lose with nothing. Do you understand?" I understood perfectly. They had the power, the lawyers, the money, the narrative, and I had nothing but the truth, which in their world meant nothing at all. That's when they invited me to the house, the mansion in Buckhead, the one I'd helped decorate, the one I'd hosted dinners in, smiled in, pretended to belong in. They sat me down at that long marble table, Margaret at the head, Lucas by the window, Brielle right there beside him, like she'd already moved in, and they slid the divorce papers across to me. "Sign it, Ava. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at the terms. $250,000, in exchange for my silence, for disappearing, for pretending I was never part of this family. Margaret leaned forward. "You're a smart woman, Ava. You know how this works. You take the money, you start over. Everyone wins." I looked at Lucas, waiting for him to say something, anything. He wouldn't even look at me. Brielle did, though. She tilted her head, almost sympathetic. "It's for the best," she said softly, like she was doing me a favor, like she cared. I picked up the pen. Margaret smiled. I set it back down. "I need time," I said. Her smile vanished. "You have 24 hours," she said. "After that, the offer drops to half, and if you try to fight this in court, Ava, you'll lose. We'll make sure of it." I stood up, walked out of that house, got in my car, and I didn't cry. Not yet, because I knew one thing they didn't. I knew something that would change everything, but I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. I went back to the apartment I'd rented with the little savings I had left. It was small, quiet, nothing like the mansion, but it was mine, and for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. I thought about what Margaret said, about how I'd lose, how they'd bury me in legal fees, how no one would believe me, and maybe she was right. Maybe I would lose, but I wasn't going to disappear, not the way they wanted, so I didn't sign. I let the 24 hours pass, then another day, then a week. Margaret called, then texted, then sent her lawyer, but I didn't respond. I just waited.
Lucas started calling too. At first it was cold, professional. "Ava, this is ridiculous. Just sign the papers and move on." Then it shifted. "You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows. Just let it go." And finally, late one night, drunk and desperate, "I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry, but this is over. You have to accept that." I didn't answer. I just let him talk, let him unravel. Because the truth was, I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his money. I needed him to understand that I wasn't the weak, forgettable woman he thought I was. Months passed. I found work. Freelance consulting. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. I stopped going to the places I knew they'd be, stopped checking social media, stopped caring what people thought. And slowly, quietly, I started to rebuild. Not the life I thought I wanted, but the life I actually needed. I started therapy, started journaling, started remembering who I was before Lucas Carter, before the mansion, before I made myself smaller to fit into a world that never wanted me. And then, one morning, everything changed. I woke up nauseous, exhausted. At first I thought it was stress, but when it didn't stop, I went to the doctor. She ran some tests, smiled, and told me I was 8 weeks pregnant. I sat there, staring at her, unable to breathe. Pregnant. I hadn't seen Lucas in months, hadn't spoken to him. But this baby, this child, was his. A Carter, an heir. The one thing Margaret wanted more than anything, and I was carrying it. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family, not Lucas, because I knew what would happen if I did. They'd use it. They'd take control. They'd find a way to turn it into something that benefited them and erased me. So I stayed quiet. I went to my appointments alone. I prepared in silence, and I waited for the right moment. That moment came 6 months later, the Carter Foundation Annual Gala, the biggest event of the year, a celebration of legacy, family, and the future. Margaret was giving a speech. Lucas was being honored. Brielle would be there, of course, on his arm, playing the role I used to play. I bought a ticket under a friend's name. I wore black, simple, elegant. I walked into that ballroom like I belonged there, because I did.
Margaret was on stage when I arrived, talking about family, about values, about the importance of legacy and bloodlines, and building something that lasts. The room was full of Atlanta's elite, investors, politicians, socialites, everyone who mattered in their world. And then she said it. And I'm so proud to announce that my son Lucas and his fiancée Brielle will be continuing the Carter legacy for generations to come. The room erupted in applause. Lucas stood, Brielle beamed, Margaret looked triumphant.
And I walked up to the microphone. The room went silent. Margaret's face went white. Lucas froze. I looked out at the crowd, at the people who'd watched me be erased, who'd smiled politely while I was humiliated, who'd chosen power over truth, and I spoke. "Congratulations, Lucas," I said, my voice calm, steady, "on your engagement, on your legacy, on the future you're building." I paused. "I just thought you should know. You're going to be a father in 3 months." The room exploded. Whispers, gasps, cameras flashing. Margaret tried to speak. Lucas tried to move toward me, but I wasn't done. "I'm not here for money," I said. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because your son, your heir, your legacy deserves to know the truth, that they come from a woman you tried to erase, a woman you humiliated, a woman you underestimated, and that no matter how much money you throw at this, you can't change that. This child is a Carter, and I will make sure they know exactly what that name cost me." I walked off that stage, out of that ballroom, into the Atlanta night. I didn't look back, I didn't wait for their reaction, I didn't need to, because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. I wasn't asking to be seen, I just was. Lucas tried to call, Margaret sent lawyers, Brielle posted something vague on Instagram about grace under pressure, but none of it mattered, because the truth was out, and the truth doesn't need money to survive, it just needs to be spoken. 3 months later, I gave birth to a baby girl, healthy, beautiful, perfect. Lucas wasn't there, I didn't invite him, but I named her after my grandmother, a woman who raised 3 kids on her own, who worked 2 jobs and still made us feel like we had everything. A woman who taught me that strength isn't loud, it's quiet, it's showing up, it's surviving, and it's knowing your worth, even when no one else does. Margaret tried to fight for custody, for visitation, for control, but my lawyer was smarter. We had documentation, emails, texts, proof of every humiliation, every threat, every attempt to silence me. And when it came down to it, the courts saw what I'd always known, that I was the parent who showed up, who fought, who chose my child over my pride. Lucas got supervised visits, Margaret got nothing, and Brielle, she left him 6 months later. Apparently, a man who cheats on his wife isn't great husband material. Who knew? I moved out of Atlanta, started over, again. But this time, I wasn't running, I was choosing. I built a life I'm proud of, a life where my daughter knows she's loved, where she'll never have to make herself smaller to be accepted, where she'll know that the people who tried to erase us didn't win, because we're still here. And that envelope they slid across the table, the one they expected me to sign without question, I framed it. I hung it in my office, not as a reminder of what I lost, but as a reminder of what I refused to give them, my dignity, my voice, my truth. Because at the end of the day, they had all the money in the world, and I had something they could never buy. I had me, and that was enough.